Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to come and enjoy this beautiful property and to say thank you to so many people who worked very hard to make this happen. This is an unbelievable opportunity for us to really celebrate the land. We're going to have just a couple of speakers this morning, say a few words, and then thankfully Gary's going to take us on a walk. And I've already heard two stories. I can't wait to hear the rest as we walk this beautiful property. So I'm Gary Shalla. I'm the Executive Director of the Inland Northwest Land Conservancy. And I'm going to introduce first our Conservation Director, Chris DeForest.
Well, welcome all of you. I hope you've all had a chance to see the map and see where the Trautman Ranch has for 80-some years been the missing link in Riverside State Park. I want to take you back about 80 years to the mid-1930s, 33, 34. Visionary group of people, families, Washington Water Power, and the community put together Riverside State Park, about 10,000 acres, now more with the Little Spokane River additions. About 10 years on, the Trautman family bought this land, and I'm not going to tell their story. But I'm going to fast forward to the late 1990s. This had been the Trautman property for decades, for generations. In 1998, there was a state process called the CAMP process. Raise your hand if you were involved in that. All right. They can give you the history. That plan for Riverside State Park identified lands that really should someday be part of this park. And portions of this property were highlighted in that plan as things that should be part of the park, partly for Centennial Trail and trail through this. Have you been on the Centennial Trail on Carlson Road? Some of you have. Yeah. It's kind of crowded. It'd be nice to have another way around. So that was in 1998. Through the 2000s, there was a succession of Inland Northwest Land Conservancy people. Eric Erickson, raise your hands. Asha Renberg, and Roger McRoberts, who periodically met with John Trautman, walked the property with him, heard him say that he wanted this to be parkland someday. So if any of you deal with landowners, you know that things take time, as do government processes. Through the 2000s, there were at least 3 attempts to make the deal happen, to have this property become part of the park. There were a couple of Conservation Futures nominations, and they kept falling through. I have notes. This is only part of the Trautman file from when Asha Renberg walked the land with John Trautman. Eric Erickson prepared a nomination to Spokane County's Conservation Futures program, which is a tiny little tax on all property owners that generates money for the county to purchase land for recreation and wildlife habitat. And there are people here we'll recognize later who can tell you more about that. It was a nomination. It didn't go through. The Inland Northwest Land Conservancy Land Protection Committee and Board of Directors endorsed that nomination. In 2006, we secured money from Avista to buy an option on the property if that was needed to hold it in place until state funding could come through. But we just missed the funding cycle, so it had to hold over. Meanwhile, the deal never gelled for the Trautmans to sell the property to the state parks. So that's 2005, 2006, 2008. Time is passing. People from the Inland Northwest Land Conservancy keep checking in with John Trautman and with state parks and seeing if something can happen. And one of the amazing things about this property I want to mention is that because and I don't know, Gary, if we'll make it all the way up to the top, but
no,
okay. This property is not only just a two-dimensional missing link in 3,000 acres of state park land there and 5,000 acres there and 4,000 or 5,000 acres of state and county parklands, but it's a three-dimensional link. And I'll show you this map later, but Eric Erickson generated this map of all the people who can see this property because it spans over 500 feet of elevation. This is Idaho over here. So people from all along the Little Spokane River and into Idaho can see this property. And now they can see it as it is, and this is the way it will be. So I want to fast forward Sadly, to May 29th, 2014, John Trautman passed away, and it was kind of now or never. In July 2014, Gary Trautman and Paul Knowles and Chris Godotti with Riverside State Park and I met at Eric Erickson's house and said, "What would you like to do?" And the family said, "You know, it was always John's wish that this be parkland, but we need to get this taken care of, get it wrapped up, and make it all work." And so the race was on. Eric Erickson prepared a nomination for Inland Northwest Land Conservancy to nominate this property for Spokane County Conservation Futures to purchase. Riverside State Park said we could work something out where if the county buys it, the state parks will manage it, because State Parks headquarters is literally a stone's throw. So there was a race. The county has an unforeseen opportunities provision for its Conservation Futures program. So in this case, the owner who passed away, it was time to get moving. We didn't have time to wait until the next regular opening. So Eric and the Land Conservancy prepared a nomination. The county and the state went to warp speed on figuring out an intergovernmental agreement. How many of you work in government? Okay. What's a warp? Anyway, a fast agreement between the agencies that this would work. And there are letters of support. Raise your hand if you signed a letter of support. All right. The organizations included, obviously, Inland Northwest Land Conservancy, Riverside State Park, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, Jack Nisbet, Lisa Langelier, Gene Keever, Tina Weinkoop, Joni Sasich. The Spokane Audubon Society endorsed this, the Lands Council. There were letters of support from both of John Trautman's sons, Gary Trautman and John Trautman. The Riverside State Park Foundation, saw you on the way in, supported this. The 9 Mile Community Club wanted this. The Spokane Mountaineers, the Washington Trails Association, the Backcountry Horsemen, and the Inland Northwest Trails Coalition all said, "This is the time, this is the place, let's make this parkland for once and for all." So,
Nice coming together of both.
So that was August of 2014. The nomination went in. The Parks Committee evaluated it. The intergovernmental agreements were underway. In October of 2014, the Spokane County Commissioners said, yes, make this a priority, buy this land and make it part of the parks. The Land Conservancy encouraged donations from people to help create a maintenance and operations fund for this property, including a generous contribution from the Trautman family. To make a longer story short, the deal was sealed in April of 2015, and the purchase closed on June 5th, 2015, so just a year after John Trautman had passed away. So who didn't know what warp speed was? Somebody explained to that person how just a year to see land from private hands into parks is a good speed. So, and just an update, in September, the Washington State Parks Board approved pursuing a 50-year agreement between county parks and state parks, because it makes all the sense in the world to have Riverside State Park managing this property. So, I'd like to give just a round of applause and thanks to the Trautman family. And recognition and thanks to Spokane County Parks and Riverside State Park. And to all of you who helped make this happen with your letters of support, and especially those of you who kept in touch and kept faith with John Trautman over the years. It was a great day 80 years ago when this park was formed, and it was a great day a year ago, and then recently when this missing piece, and do look at the map, what happened. There are trails that lead up to the property and away from the property, but they could never go through because this was private ground. So others can tell you why this makes more sense. And I'm delighted that we have the Trautmans here to show some of it to us this morning, but it's now all of ours to enjoy. And Anyway, thank you for coming, and thank you for all making this possible.
Next, I'd like to introduce the reason this happened. Gary Trautman, can you say a couple words for us?
My grandparents moved to the Spokane area in the 1920s. My grandfather had experience in warehousing. He served in the Navy in World War II and was part-time manager of a warehouse for the Navy in Kansas. When they moved here, he had entered a partnership. They had a small business, a warehouse, bakers and confectioners supply. They supplied all the small bakeries in Spokane and all the candy makers. They made trips, forays out into northern Idaho, eastern Montana, and as far west as Moses Lake. I understand there are a lot of east side people that don't want to get any closer to the west side than that. And they had a nice business until the supermarkets came in the late 1950s, early 1960s, because they had their own supply lines, their own bakeries. All the small bakeries basically went out of business. The candy makers disappeared. They hung on for a while. My grandfather was a good businessman. Like I said, they lived on the south side, but his wife, my grandmother Mildred, had always lived in rural areas, and she loved to ride horses. And their daughter, Marilyn, and my grandmother would come out by rickety car on dirt roads out to the 7 Mile stables and ride horses. So that began the search for my grandfather to find property where they could have the horses and open space. My grandfather needed open space too because he had a parrot that liked the range a bit, which was kind of an interesting deal. They lost him up on the south side a couple times, so they needed someplace else for the parrot. They bought what was a dairy farm. It included a chunk of property going this way and a chunk of property going that way. There was a grand old barn back here, 2-story barn, great wood barn, still used right up till the end. There were 8 stalls in it for the milk cows, later on, of course, for the horses. Up here, if you wander around in here, you'll notice a concrete trough. That trough, there's a spring up here. They would run water from the spring to the trough. Put the milk cans in the trough to cool, and the milk people would come out and collect the cans once a week.
Wow.
So when my grandparents moved in, they inherited a ready-to-go barn, a ready-to-go corral. They built a ranch house and basically lived here. My grandmother rode horses for a long time. We've got pictures in the 1950s where she had like 5 or 6 horses up here. But eventually they got old, and as she got old, you know, the horses became less important. But my grandmother loved animals. So we had a chicken coop back here, which is still residing back here. We didn't tear everything out because we didn't find all of it. And she kept peacocks in there. And so the peacocks were in there about 9 months of the year, and 9 months of the year they'd be out here. Gorgeous birds, very loud. And at night they would fly back up here into some of these taller pines, and once they got onto branch, then they'd hop up from branch to branch to go up there and spend the night. The coyotes wouldn't get them. And then in the morning you'd hear this "Hee-yow! Hee-yow!" when they come flying down into this area. They'd pee-yow, pee-yow to warn you. And as they flew along, they went honk, honk, honk. Amazing noises that they come down through here. So as kids, we grew up collecting peacock feathers. She had dogs, lots of dachshunds. My grandfather, of course, had the parrot. The orchard was already established, but they planted more trees. Behind us, a catalpa tree. That was kind of the landmark coming in. Beautiful blooms in the spring. When fall comes, the leaves all go at once. It's quite a process to watch. My grandparents lived out their lives here. We grew up on a farm 2 miles from here down on the Spokane River. Then my brother and I went away to college. We went away to do other things. My parents eventually divorced. Mom got the house on the river. Dad moved back up here in the family ranch. And that's where he lived the rest of his years. So the process was a long process and a lot of paper. But I'll tell you who did the physical work here. 1,600 man hours we calculate, Jim Larkin and I. So it's great that you get praise for the paperwork and perseverance, etc., etc. But it was just Jim and I here. I did hire some stuff done. The demolition, we were told that there were certain landmarks that had to disappear, so our great ranch house was gone. A grand barn was gone. Kind of a crappy hay shed was gone. There were 20-some motor vehicles that my dad had accumulated. He was going to put together the perfect 1958 Buick and the perfect 1964 Buick. Would we have 4 tractors? 4 tractors, 3 boats. It was just numerous stuff that had to be moved out of here and dealt with. The hillside, when we go for a walk, I think there was over a dozen derelict cars up there that we had to get off that hillside. Pretty interesting business. Not to mention that when we take the walk, I'll tell you a little story about a boat that was up there. So, as grandchildren of my grandparents, we would come up here after school because my grandparents were retired, and we'd do our homework at the kitchen table. And once in a while, our grandfather would trot out the parrot so the parrot could talk. The parrot perfectly mimicked my grandmother's voice. Might be why she didn't like the bird too much. Because the bird would sit there and say, "Trout! Trout! God damn it, Trout, where are you?" And then it would laugh. So my grandmother and the parrot had kind of a different relationship. One day, my brother and I and a friend or two came up the road, and we were talking to our friend, because the other kids like to come up here for the peacocks and the horses and the cows, and we bragged about these cookies my grandmother made. So we get up here, and in the backyard is my grandmother. She has my grandfather's raincoat on, a pith helmet, a tennis racket, and is hanging clothes, watching for the bird. Everybody at school thought my family was nuts. So it was a family that had personality. We all tried to take care of the land. Dad left a few things behind that we had to take care of. But he very much wanted this to become part of the state park stuff, and he really wanted it left the way it was. You know, that was one of the grinding things on all these applications about where sometimes somebody would go out and say, "Well, we can see campsites here and we can see that there," and that kind of ground things to a halt a couple times for him, because he wanted it like the rest of Riverside State Park, part of nature. And hopefully that's what will happen with it. Hike it, bike it, ride horses through it, but it's a great natural area, and we'd love to see it stay that way.
Well, thank you.
I also wanted to acknowledge that you made the trip over for today. We're really grateful they did. John Trautman as well. Doug, can you come up and say a couple words for us?
Sure, I think we have Spokane County Commissioner.
Oh, it's
Milky.
Commissioner Milky, please come on up.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I just want to say thank you for all of you coming here, and most of all, thank you for allowing us to share in the celebration of preserving a property that in many ways represents what Spokane County tries to accomplish with the Conservation Futures program. It's about preserving quality wildlife habitat. It's about creating connectivity corridors for both wildlife and trail recreationists. and enhancing recreational opportunities for Spokane County that benefit our residents and contribute to our local economy. Since 1994, we have acquired and I guess built our inventory to over 7,600 acres of natural areas in the Spokane region. This is open space. It leads to the creation of miles and miles of new trails, the preservation of ecological function, and enhancement of Spokane County's quality of life. And I'll just say, when I first became county commissioner, I took a look at a map. First, it was hard to find a map with all the properties on one map, but took a look at it, and they just kind of seem to be spots all over the place. And one of the things that we have tried to do is create a little bit more rhyme and reason and create corridors. Like I say, not only for wildlife, but for people to enjoy, that are continuous. And I think with the acquisition of the Trautman property, the addition of that to this is truly a legacy project. I thought the stories, and I'm looking forward to hearing more stories from Gary, are just tremendous. Not only has his family had a deep history in this region, but that history and that legacy is going to live on through this property and through this being part of our Conservation Futures legacy that we will give not only to this generation, but to future generations as well. The one thing that I would like to do is introduce Doug Chase. Doug is our director of our county parks department. He has a tremendous team that work with him, and I know that they spend a lot of hours trying to create these dreams from just not only dreams, but into reality, and again, make them part of our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug and congratulate him and his team in being able to work with so many other dedicated people to making this a reality. Thank you so much for coming out this morning.
Thank you, Commissioner Mielke, for taking time out of your day, and everyone for being here. We're very appreciative. The Conservation Futures program, I just feel so fortunate, as Commissioner Mielke mentioned, to have such a great team. I'll have John Batelli raise his hand. Paul Knowles. Paul Knowles, one more time, Paul. There we go. There's the guy. Thank you. These gentlemen do so much. I can't begin to even touch on it, really, to help this program perform the way that it does and take advantage of the opportunities in our community that come up, and we feel very fortunate, very privileged, and it's folks like yourself that really help this program work, that bring these opportunities before us in a way that we can really take advantage of it and go that warp speed. I like the sound of that. It doesn't always work that way, but when folks take the time to come together and put everything, all the pieces, it can really work well and really work fast. And I think this property, this project, is just a perfect example of that coming together. So with everything else that has been said today, I'll just hit a few highlights so I don't repeat Mr. DeForest's presentation, and Gary's was fantastic and covered half of it here, if not 3/4. So with that, I really want to thank the Inland Northwest Land Conservancy, a lot of folks that we've heard, Eric Erickson, Krista Forrest, Gary Shalaw, who brought the nomination to the table and worked with our staff. And again, Gary and Jim Larkin for the unbelievable task, which you can all see here. Just amazing. And I think many of you had a chance
Eric's got before pictures.
to see the property before, and I mean, it's really, this is what it's about, and to be able to start with the property in this condition, and we absolutely are committed going forward to keep it in this condition. I mean, that's what our program's about. So we're very, very excited about that. We're very pleased. I want to thank Gary and John again along the way. Just everything worked very well. I want to point out Linnell Hott, who was one of our Park Advisory Committee and Land Evaluation Committee members when this came through. Linnell, thank you. Am I missing any other former or current Park Advisory Committee members? Again, just, one more element of our program, our department, that helps us all come together and perform so well. So with that, again, there's been some very generous donations that will help us care for the property going forward from the Trautman family, Mr. Eric Erickson, and even Larry Small has has contributed and pledged to help us with trail improvements, to help everyone be able to access the property going forward. So we're very excited for what's ahead and to help this property serve as another great example of just what our program's about. So with that, I've said more than enough. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. I know we're all excited to get on a walk. We've got one more person, and then we'll follow Gary through the woods. I'd like to bring up finally Chris Gadati from the state park.
All right, well, I want to go hiking too, so I will keep this short. Pretty much everything that I was going to say has been said. But I do want to point out that, you know, we live in an amazing community. I'm so grateful to live in the Spokane area. This community is so progressive in terms of the way that folks embrace the outdoors and recreation and natural resources. It's truly an amazing thing. You know, Spokane's motto, near nature, near perfect. I mean, it's not; those aren't just words. It embraces and shows what kind of values this community has. This acquisition itself is an amazing example of coming together to make that kind of thing happen. You know, I had the great honor of meeting John Trautman and getting to know him a little bit. We met on this piece of property, and one of the things that was absolutely clear as soon as you met John was how much he loved this piece of property. He had just a passion for it. He was feeding the turkey and the deer. He loved every tree. He knew it like the back of his hand. And his greatest wish was to see it protected so that future generations could experience the same kind of experience that he had in the natural environment, that he could experience the wildlife, the flora, and the fauna. He was an impressive man, and I really appreciate his vision for this property. But it wouldn't have happened without Gary and John. And I have to tell you that, you know, you've heard some talk about how fast this moved at lightning speed. It really, truly is remarkable. I have to believe that this was just meant to be. I mean, the way that everything came about. But it wouldn't have happened without Gary and without John. And without them trying to honor their father's wishes to protect this for future generations. And look around you. I mean, this is one of the most beautiful spots you're going to find. I mean, there's 280 acres. It ties the park together. You guys have heard all about that. Your grandchildren, your grandchildren's grandchildren, and generations after that are going to be able to come here and see the deer and the moose and the turkeys. They're going to be able to hike a trail and listen to the wind through the leaves. That's an incredible legacy to leave behind. So Gary and John, I just want to thank you so much for honoring your father's wishes and helping this to happen. Again, I have to thank some of the same people that have already been thanked, but I particularly want to thank Eric Erickson. Eric has been, this wouldn't have happened without Eric. I mean, it really wouldn't have. He's had a passion for helping the Trautman family protect this for years. Ever since I got to Riverside, one of the first things I heard about was how important it was to find a way to try to protect this property. And Eric is the one who was instrumental in reaching out to the Trautman family after John's death. He was instrumental in, you know, putting together the Conservation Futures nomination. He put his money where his mouth is, and I don't know if most people know that, but he helped contribute into the endowment fund that will help maintain and protect this property. So I personally want to thank Eric. I mean, this wouldn't have happened without you. And the whole Inland Northwest Land Conservancy. Krista Forrest was awesome to work with. Gary Shalley, you guys are just wonderful. And then again, I have to agree with Commissioner Milkey. You have an incredible staff. We have an amazing partnership with the Spokane County Parks folks. We work together all the time. We manage the portions of the Centennial Trail together. We have the Little Spokane Natural Area. We have Sontag. We have this. It's an amazing, amazing partnership. It's collaborative. It's innovative. These guys are just top-notch. They're there to serve the public and find ways to make things happen. And you know, they're just awesome to work with. So I'm really looking forward. We're going to be signing the agreement formally with to manage the property with them. I'm personally excited as the manager of Riverside. This is an amazing piece of property. It connects two of the largest pieces of the park that we have together. We've had people calling us constantly. They're interested, a huge groundswell of community support for acquisition of this property, and now a huge groundswell of support. People are chomping at the bit to come out here and help us manage it and develop trails. So our vision is to work closely with county, develop a trail plan, and then harness some of that volunteer energy, reach out to all the constituents groups who have spoke up. We have the Backcountry Horsemen, we have the Washington Trail Association, we have Evergreen Mountain Bike Alliance, we have just a myriad of people who are interested in this piece of property and helping, protect it and develop a system of trails that will hopefully get people out so they can experience the incredible natural resources we have here. And the goal is to protect it and keep it in its current state and allow people to enjoy it just like it is. So thank you to the community for all the support, and thank you to everybody for making this happen. This truly is something to celebrate, so thank you.
Well, thank you all. We should get on the walk. I'd like to just say that we have, when they're not blowing away, thank you for grabbing the flyers, we have our current newsletter, we have pamphlets, and we have membership applications up here. We'd love to have you take one home with you, learn more about what the Inland Northwest Conservancy does and how we help facilitate these kinds of transactions moving forward into the future. Thank you all. Gary, will you lead us on a wonderful hike, please?
Sure.